Husband took a day-long nap while I was on the edge of breaking from new motherhood, and now I want out of the marriage. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I've been married to my 30-year-old husband for just under a year, though we've been together 6. We share a 3-month-old baby girl, our first child, and I stay home to care for her while my husband works from home. I never thought being a first-time mom would feel quite this lonely, but lately, I find myself overwhelmed and on the verge of breaking. Even before our daughter arrived, cracks had started forming. When I was pregnant, my mother-in-law found every opportunity to make me anxious with stories about miscarriages, stillbirths, and every worst-case scenario she could invent. She'd lean in and whisper "dead baby" at me whenever my husband was out of earshot. She always denied it, and while my husband offered sympathy, he never truly confronted her or shielded me. That experience left a mark, and I carried resentment with me right into motherhood. After giving birth, what little support I expected from my husband vanished. While I lay in the hospital recovering, he'd leave to sleep at home because the couch in my room wasn't comfortable. I called him repeatedly, desperate for company, and only after dozens of calls would he rouse himself and return. When it was time to go home, he expected me to help carry bags to the car, fresh from childbirth, struggling to even walk. It wasn't until the nurse intervened that he realized I shouldn't be lifting anything. Once we got home, the complaints began, about his sleep, about messes, about anything inconvenient for him. Never mind that I was the one bleeding, exhausted, barely hanging on. There were moments when he shone. He cheered me on during my struggles with nursing, and I'll forever give him credit for that. But as the weeks wore on, I realized I was breaking apart. I spent nights sobbing from sleep deprivation, staring at him sleeping 8, 9, even 10 uninterrupted hours, while I got up with the baby every hour. He'd tell me how exhausted he felt, and I'd unravel in tears. Those words became a trigger I couldn't bear. His mother started visiting, and together they left trails of chaos behind. Dishes, toys, dirty cups, all waiting for me. My husband took one look at the basement mess and immediately roped me in to help him clean it. I protested, but he persisted, so I lifted boxes and heavy things, only to start bleeding badly again. When my doctor scolded me for it, I tried to draw boundaries, but he kept asking, getting annoyed when I refused. It became a cycle. He'd complain the whole day about what hadn't been done. By month 3, I felt the fabric of our marriage unraveling. The distance between us was only growing. The thought of sex or even affection filled me with resentment. Every time he entered the room, my whole body tensed. Yet he'd keep asking if I was okay, and all I could muster was "I'm fine." I didn't know how to explain that I wasn't fine. I was miserable, exhausted, and desperate for help I never got. That's how we arrived at tonight. My husband pushed me about walking the dog. I tried to explain that I simply didn't have the energy, not after being up since 2:30 a.m. breastfeeding, not with my body running on empty. He complained and sulked about it, but eventually he said I could nap. Something in me snapped. I reminded him I hadn't slept a full 8 hours in months. He stormed off, locking himself in his office for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, I dissolved. I spent the entire afternoon breaking down, wrung out from exhaustion and frustration. When 11 p.m. rolled around and he still hadn't emerged, I cracked and went to fetch him. He barely responded. At that moment, all the pent-up pain just poured out of me. I told him I hated him, that I wanted to run away, that maybe divorce was the only way out. For once, he listened, apologized, said he was sorry. I asked what he'd been doing all day while I struggled just to stand. He said he'd napped. He napped the entire day. While I was barely scraping by, crying in every corner of the house, he was asleep. And there was nothing left in me to console him. He said he was sorry, that he loved me, over and over. But this time, I had nothing to give back. I just wept. Now it's 2 a.m., I can't sleep, and he's snoring next to me. I lie here seething, wanting nothing more than to grab my baby and leave this house, this marriage, this endless loneliness. I'm left wondering if being a single mom might be less painful than feeling this invisible. Update 1. I finally fixed what had felt broken for so long. Let me start by clarifying. When I say FTM, I mean first-time mom, not female to male. Everything in me was screaming that something needed to change, and urgently. So, we talked. Well, to be precise, I poured my heart out, and he listened. I told him flat out that I couldn't do this anymore, that either something had to change immediately, or I was going to go back home and take my baby with me. At first he just stared at me, completely confused, until he noticed the 2 bags I had packed, sitting by my dresser, ready to go. It was like a dam burst. I finally managed to put into words all the resentment that had been bubbling up inside me. I talked about his mother's cruel, careless behavior, about how alone I felt at the hospital and now at home, about how everything seemed to fall on me while he went out and brought home a paycheck. The realization stung. I'd never actually told him how all this made me feel. I just kept bottling it up, letting it corrode me from the inside. At first, he got defensive. I warned him, if this conversation was going to be full of excuses, I was walking out. That got through to him. He stopped, and truly listened. For the first time, he was genuinely remorseful. He only said sorry once, and it actually meant something. He started asking questions about what I needed him to do. Together, we mapped out a plan, something real, something that made my lungs unclench for the first time in months. He's handling all the dog walks from now on. His mother is banned from the house, barred from having any contact with me or our baby. Once he's off work, I'm off duty for the day. I'll keep breastfeeding because it's fulfilling for me. If you saw the way my baby pats my boob when she's nursing, you'd get it. Her big hazel eyes are like my own little drug. Right now I'm typing this while soaking in a warm bath. I've been promised the entire weekend to decompress and sleep as much as I want. I'll be pumping instead of nursing this weekend, and we have a stash of frozen milk ready. He knows the routine, the bottles, the amount to feed, all of it. I trust that he's capable. I can actually hear him unloading the dishwasher while I write this. We made a commitment to spend one day each weekend as a couple, not just as parents, to remind myself that I'm a person, not only a mom. We're planning to start couples counseling, and soon I'll be in individual therapy too. He's already seeing someone for his own issues. His childhood wasn't ideal. He never had a father who showed him real love, just an adult toddler of a father, always throwing tantrums and verbally abusing everyone around. My husband has often commented on how my dad always drops everything for me, how he wants to be like that. But I had to tell him the painful truth: he isn't that person, not yet. Right now, he's failing me, and he's failing our daughter. That was hard for him to hear, but he needed to hear it. So now, we take things day by day. If he's able to really change, I'll have to wait and see. My bags are still packed by the door, a quiet reminder to myself that I can leave if I need to. Just knowing that option exists makes me feel a bit stronger. I'm hopeful, but not naive. Maybe we can't come back from this, and maybe that's okay. I have to take care of myself if I want my little girl to have a mama who smiles at more than just her tiny face. I've got an appointment scheduled for a postpartum depression screening, and my mom will be here at the start of next month. My family is waiting for me, their door wide open, whenever I decide to come home. When my dad told me he'd be on the first flight out whenever I needed him so I wouldn't have to fly home alone, I just lost it and cried. Right now, just getting all of this out helps. My heart feels a bit lighter. Update 2. After a long time of holding back, I finally feel ready to share where I am now. Honestly, I was terrified to put myself out there and give an update. The version of me who wrote that last post was absolutely at rock bottom. Looking back now, I wish I could reach through time, wrap my arms around her, and tell her it would be okay. I was shattered and desperate for someone to just be brutally honest with me. In the aftermath, reading those responses felt like a punch straight to the heart, so much, all at once. I had to step away, sit with those words, and let them sink in before I could move forward. Something huge happened after that. I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and anxiety not long after pouring my heart out. It was the people who urged me to talk to my doctor who truly changed my life, and I owe them more thanks than I can ever express. Once I got proper treatment, it felt like the sun finally came out again. My entire world shifted for the better. Usually, people share all the gritty details of their journey and updates. But there's something bigger and more important than just the play-by-play of my personal story that I want to share. To any new moms, and the people who love them, please listen to me. Check in on the moms in your life. If you've just had a baby, make sure there's someone who really sees you, who knows you well enough to notice the little changes. Bringing a new baby into the world is supposed to be so full of joy, but it's normal not to feel like celebrating every single moment. However you feel is real and you don't need to hide it. Take your mental health seriously. Even if you think you're okay, prioritize yourself. Your baby's well-being is linked to your own. Give yourself permission to make yourself a priority, because while you keep your baby safe and loved, someone needs to be looking out for you with the same fierce care. As for me, my life has completely changed. The moment I began putting myself first and actually taking care of my health was the moment everything started turning the corner. I know some people thought leaving my husband was the only answer and maybe thought I was just making excuses for him, but unless you've lived through it, you really can't know the whole story. The reality is I found happiness, safety, and health for myself and my daughter. That's what matters. My husband, against every one of my expectations, stepped up. I kept waiting for him to let me down again, but he didn't. He worked to be the man I needed him to be. That transformation felt better than winning any jackpot. It's true, people can change, if they're committed. Things are better now, truly better. My daughter is healthy, joyful, and so stubborn she reminds me of myself. Nothing will ever hold her back. She adores her daddy, sometimes, I think, even more than me, and as for the two of us, we're learning every day to really communicate with each other. With a clear head, I can finally see the truth. We're going to be okay, because we're working together, and we're still growing. Update 3. 2 weeks ago, at 3:07 a.m., our daughter went lava hot in my arms and her little hand stopped fluttering. It felt like someone yanked the floor out from under me. I froze. My husband didn't. He slid the baby thermometer across my palm and said, "Steady and low, I've got her, pack the bag." He ran the tub, cool water, washcloth over her forehead. I could hear him counting under his breath while I shoved a blanket and spare onesie and the battered giraffe into the bag. He strapped her into the car seat like it was muscle memory, one hand on her belly so she'd feel him, one hand on the buckle. I sat in the back with her while we sped through empty streets that felt like a movie set. His knuckles were white, but his jaw wasn't clenched. When I started to cry, he reached a hand back until my fingers found his wrist. The ER was all fluorescent flicker and whispers. He did the intake. He told the nurse I had had a rough postpartum and that if anyone needed something, they should ask him first. I watched him say the words and I felt something crack open in my chest in a way that didn't hurt. He held our daughter skin to skin while they checked her. Fever. Virus. All the terrible things racing through my head faded when the doctor smiled and said, "You did good coming in." We dozed half upright in those awful chairs with our girl snoring on his ribs. Every time I startled awake, he was already looking at me. "Sleep," he whispered. "I have her." I believed him. On the way home, sunrise brushing the tops of houses, he told me he'd made an appointment for a sleep study. He said it like a confession. I didn't bring it up, he did. "I keep telling myself I'm just tired because I work and we have a baby, but I'm not right," he said. "I want to be right." He got the wires and the mask and the ugly little machine and, 3 nights later, he woke up at 6 a.m. and sat at the edge of our bed staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. "I slept," he said, "like a kid who just saw snow." It changed him. The first night he told me to go to the guest room and shut the door and he would take every wake up. I laughed because it felt like a joke. I did it. I fell asleep at 9:15 and when I opened my eyes, it was almost 4 a.m. I sobbed in the dark and I don't even think it was because I was sad. The weekend after that, my dad flew in and the two of them put up a fence in the yard and installed a dog door. There was sawdust in his hair and sweat down his back and he kept looking over at me through the window like a little boy asking if I saw. Every time I let the dog out now without wrestling a leash over a baby's head, I want to kiss the fence. We did couples counseling like we said. Our therapist is tiny and wears boots that make her 2 inches taller and she asks impossible questions. She had us write letters to the parents we needed when we were small, and then to the parents we want to be. I didn't make it past the first paragraph without shaking. He cried reading his out loud. He said he wanted to be interruptible. He said he wanted our daughter to never wonder if he would come. We drove home quiet and our house felt different, like it had shifted half an inch toward us. I turned the guest room, the one Mill always said would be her room, into mine. Plants that look like green fireworks, a chair that swallows me so completely I can disappear, a lock on the door that clicks like a seatbelt. I put a tiny lamp on the floor and a stack of library books that I will probably keep renewing because just the stack is making me feel held. He bathes our daughter every night now. I listen to them from down the hall, his voice soft and ridiculous, narrating the bubbles like they're a parade. I wish that were the end of it. It isn't. His mother showed up last Tuesday with a bakery box and a key she shouldn't have had. We changed the locks after the first boundary talk, but she had made a copy months ago. She tried it didn't work, and then she stood on our porch and pounded. I watched it all through the peephole and felt the old fear run cold in my body. He stepped in front of the door and he didn't raise his voice. He cracked it just enough to speak and he said, "You will not come into this house. You will not speak to my wife. You will not see my daughter." She said that phrase under her breath, the one that lives in my bones like a bruise, and I felt my stomach drop. He didn't flinch. He closed the door. He called the non-emergency line, and when the officers came, he stood on our porch and told them why. He filed a trespass notice and handed them a typed letter he'd written the week before, outlining boundaries and consequences. She left a note under my windshield wiper the next morning anyway. He took it to the station and filed for a protection order. Her number is blocked on everything. The pediatrician has a note on our chart. If she wants to see our daughter one day, she can ask me through a therapist, and she can sit in a room with a professional and say out loud what she did. Until then, the only version of her allowed in this house is the idea that my husband and I can be the kind of parents who break chains. There was a moment I didn't expect. It was small and I think that's why it undid me. We were in the kitchen. Our daughter had just discovered that banging a wooden spoon on the high chair makes a noise that could summon a dragon. He was rinsing bottles. He dried his hands and walked over and he said, "Can you give me your rings?" I handed them to him, confused, and he took one of those velvet boxes out of his back pocket like a magician. He'd had them resized and cleaned and engraved with our daughter's initials and the date she was born. "I'd like to start over, but with the part that made us parents sewn into it," he said. He slid mine back on. I felt ridiculous crying over polished metal, but I cried anyway. I weaned off the night feeds last week, not all at once, not without grief, but in that gentle, stretchy way that feels like a rubber band easing back to shape. I still nurse during the day, because her warm hand on my skin is still the closest thing to church I know, but at night I can sleep and my body doesn't scream. Sometimes I wake up at 2 a.m. just out of habit and I pad down the hall and stand in the doorway while he rocks her. He doesn't see me. He hums the same song my dad hummed to me and I have to press my fingers to my mouth to keep from making a noise. We did something else that felt impossible a few months ago. We went away for a day. Not far. We drove to a lake that looks like a big piece of glass laid down in the middle of trees. He wore her in the carrier and she fell asleep with her mouth open like a puppy. I took a nap in the car with the windows down and the sun found my knees. When I woke up, he was standing outside my window holding a tiny paper cup with one bite of vanilla ice cream melting fast. "She made a face like the world just started," he said. I was mad for a beat that he didn't wait for me. Then I looked at them, his shirt stained with drips, her tongue an exclamation point, and the jealousy slipped out of my body like a sigh. We are all getting firsts. I don't have to own them all to be her mother. I finally unpacked the 2 bags by the door. Not because I forgot I could leave at any time, but because I don't want to live like I'm halfway gone. I washed the clothes and put the toothbrush back in the cup and slid the phone charger into the drawer. I moved the car seat from the hallway into the trunk, not as an escape hatch, but because we keep driving toward things instead of running away from them. I still check in with myself the way I check the baby monitor. Quick glance, okay, breathing, but I'm not living in a constant fire drill anymore. My husband still messes up. He left a load of laundry in the washer for 2 days and it smelled like a swamp when I found it, and there are moments when the old ache taps me on the shoulder and I think, see? Nothing really changed. Then I catch him sitting on the floor with our daughter and a set of measuring cups like they are the most fascinating thing in the world, and I remember that change doesn't look like a movie makeover. It's a sink full of bottles that are clean. It's a fence. It's a man in an ER telling a stranger to be gentle with me. It's a lock on a door that clicks when I need it to. It's ice cream at a lake and a machine on a nightstand that hums all night like a soft apology. I'm not naive. I don't think we are magically cured or that one good run wipes out all the bad. But I kept my promise to myself. I put myself first. I got help. And he didn't just say he'd catch up, he laced up his shoes and he ran. I'm starting to believe we might keep running in the same direction. Our daughter is growing so fast she feels heavier every morning when I pick her up. She is the best thing I ever chose, and right now, she has 2 parents who choose her and each other, on purpose, every day. That's not everything, but it's a lot. It's enough to make the house feel like a home again. Update 4. The courthouse smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner, like a school hallway holding its breath. Our daughter chewed on the strap of her sun hat and made a sound that was half bird, half kazoo. He kept rubbing his wedding band like it had a genie in it. I had printed copies of everything and slid them into a folder I didn't open because I didn't want to see the words again. She arrived in a cloud of perfume and the kind of pearls that clack when you move too fast. She tried to look past me and he stepped sideways in that small, firm way that says no without saying anything. Inside, the judge talked like a metronome. When it was his turn, my husband stood up, cleared his throat, and, without a single apology in the middle, said exactly what happened. He said the line she used like a curse and it landed in the room like a brick dropped into water. Her mouth made a shape like shock and then rage elbowed through. She raised her voice. The bailiff was already moving before the judge lifted a hand. It was strangely quiet after that, even with the air conditioner ringing itself to death. The order was granted for 2 years. No contact. No exceptions without a clinician in the room. On the way out, he put the folded paper in my bag instead of his pocket. We didn't go home. He took a left at the light and parked in front of the county building. Come with me, he said, the way you'd say it if you were about to get on a roller coaster you've watched other people scream on and still want to try. We went upstairs and sat on metal chairs that wobbled. He wrote his name on a form and then he crossed out his last name and wrote mine. He didn't look at me while he did it, just the way his hand moved like it had been trying to do this for years and finally got permission. I want what we're building to be the name we use to build it, he said. He asked if we could add mine to our daughters. I nodded and my chest felt too full for my skin. The clerk had lavender nail polish and a tiny band-aid on her ring finger. She handed us a packet that felt heavier than paper. There's a notice taped to our fridge now, the kind with a perforated bottom and instructions about publication, and every time I walk by it I touch the tape like it might float off. At home, our daughter stood holding onto the dishwasher handle and used the flat of her hand to slap at her reflection until her hair stuck up with static. He handed her a wooden spoon and she banged it against the drawer like a drummer who only knows one song. The dog lay on his side and sighed at us. It felt like a quiet that didn't have waiting in it. The next afternoon my mom flew in and we did something that used to feel impossible. We left. Not far. A motel off the highway with a pool that made my hair smell like kindergarten. The bedspread was orange in a way no color in nature is orange. I pumped in the bathroom while he sat on the closed toilet and held the bottles like they were glass birds. We ate tacos in bed and watched a movie we'd both seen a dozen times, mouths open in the dark like teenagers. He touched me like I was new and nothing hurt, and afterwards we lay on our backs and stared at the ceiling and I laughed at absolutely nothing until my stomach ached. When I woke up at 7:12 without an alarm or a cry, the silence made a sound I can't explain. He was already sitting up, legs over the side of the bed, mask line on his cheek, grinning. I slept through the night and didn't miss you for any of it, he said, and we both laughed because it sounded like cheating and also like a win. The first steps happened a week later and it ripped me open in a good way. We were on the kitchen tile. He was by the fridge, palms up like he was waiting for rain, and I was near the stove with a smear of avocado on my knee. She let go of the cabinet and took one step and then another and then that frantic, brave little third. She fell the way babies do, like a planned collapse with a bounce in it, and looked up at us to see what face we would make. He made the one that says you did it, and I made the one that says I saw you do it and I'll never forget. He said, I can be interrupted, and left the spaghetti boiling to clump without complaint so he could clap. We ate gluey noodles that tasted like the best meal of my life. His father called 2 nights after the hearing. Unknown number, late enough to feel like a dare. He looked at the screen, then at me. He let it ring until it went to voicemail. He blocked it. He didn't explain it to me with caveats that make your lungs tight. He opened the notes app on his phone and wrote, "You don't get a say in this family," and then he emailed it to himself and our therapist and closed the phone like he was putting a lid on a jar. There have been small, stupid, holy moments that keep stacking like pennies on a windowsill. He stood at the DMV with a paper number in his fingers and came home with a temporary license that says the name he chose. He signed a prescription pickup because he forgot his old last name was still on the pharmacy account and he laughed instead of swearing. He sat on the floor and labeled 3 storage bins with painter's tape and new words. Winner. Too small. Keep. He made sourdough and killed the starter twice, and the third time it lived and the bread came out skewed and gorgeous and our daughter gnawed the heel like a teether. He still leaves a towel on the bed and I still make a sound that is halfway between a sigh and a snake, and then I find him in the hallway sitting crisscross while she drags a whisk along the baseboard, and I breathe out. I went to a class by myself. It wasn't anything fancy, just a night course in a room that smells like dry erase marker, about stories and how to pin them to paper without killing them. I took notes that weren't about nap schedules or pediatric dosing. There was a girl with blue hair and a laugh that sounded like a sneeze, and she asked me if I wanted to split a cookie and I said yes. I texted him a picture of the chalkboard and he sent back a picture of our daughter with yogurt in both eyebrows. On the drive home, my hands felt like mine in a way they haven't in a long time. When I opened the front door, the house smelled like garlic and baby shampoo. He met me in the entryway and said, "Tell me everything," and then he actually listened. I told him about the sentence that stuck under my tongue like a seed. He told me she said dog and then looked at the dog like she'd just summoned a friend. We did something silly and a little dramatic with the key, the one she had made for our old lock and swore she didn't. It had been in an evidence envelope since the day the cop took it out of her hand. Last Saturday, we took it out to the yard. He dug a little hole by the fence post. Our daughter watched from the grass, stripping blades and handing them to the dog like presents. We dropped the key in and covered it with earth. He pressed his palm to the mound and I pressed mine over his. It wasn't magic. It wasn't enough. It was still something. When it started to rain, he left the tools outside and followed me in without arguing about rust. We sat on the kitchen floor and ate raspberries from the carton like we were the ones who had been good. There was a night last week when I woke up at 2:11 anyway. Habit. The machine on his nightstand hummed like a calm thing. The baby monitor showed a square of darkness with a heartbeat of blue light. I walked down the hall and stood in the doorway even though no one needed me. He was in the rocker, our daughter asleep heavy across his arm, one sock on, one sock abandoned on the rug. He hummed my dad's song under his breath and whenever he hit the part he doesn't know, he made it up and it sounded right. I let myself lean on the doorframe. The house made settling sounds that didn't feel like threats. I thought about my bags, how I carried them to the back of our closet and put them up on the highest shelf. Not gone. Not forgotten. Just not packed. I don't know when we will get the stamped papers back, or how it will feel to write our names next to each other and see them match where they didn't before. I do know this. Today our daughter stood in the yard behind the fence her father built and held up a dandelion like it was a gold coin. He bent down so they were eye to eye and he blew, gentle, and she laughed so hard she hiccuped. The seeds went everywhere. Some landed on our side. Some floated over. We didn't chase them. We let them go. Update 5. The envelope came on a Tuesday with the kind of weight you can feel through cardboard. Our mailbox is crooked, so it leaned there like it needed to catch its breath. He brought it in and set it on the counter between a banana with a bruise and a bib with strawberries on it that will never really be white again. We didn't open it right away. He made coffee. The dog tapped his nails against the tile like a metronome. Our daughter discovered the joy of closing the same drawer 6 times. When we finally slid a butter knife under the flap and shook the papers out, the seal caught the light. His name, then mine, then ours, printed like the government was blessing a secret we had already been living. He laughed the exact laugh he makes when a joke is mean to him and good at the same time. He signed it once right there and then practiced on a grocery list: milk, eggs, berries, each loop a little surer than the last. At the clerk's office, a woman with a strawberry pin on her sweater stamped the copies like she was playing a drum. She asked if we wanted a second official copy because sometimes they get wet, and I said yes because of course they do, in our house where everything ends up with a ring of water around it. He updated the social security card and stood too straight for the picture because he was trying to be the version of himself his handwriting had already claimed. When the laminated temporary license spit out, he held it like a ticket and I found myself taking a picture of him taking a picture. It felt ordinary and holy at the same time. We didn't throw a huge party for her first birthday. We took a quilt to the patchy grass at the park by the library and smeared frosting on a cake that slid on the plate because I forgot parchment paper exists. He lit a candle and the wind put it out twice, and the third time he cupped his palm around it like a little cave and it stayed. Our daughter clapped with one hand and then used the other to pat the flame like it was a friend. He caught her wrist. I blew the candle. He sang off key on purpose because it makes her smile. Her face was a color frosting hasn't invented yet. A woman I didn't know walked by with a stroller and handed me a napkin and said, "One," and I said, "One," and we stood in that moment that is every mother in the park saying, "We made it here." The blueberries were my fault. I cut them in halves when I should have quartered them and I will remember that sentence even when my hair is gray. One rolled to the back of her tongue and her eyes went round and empty at the same time and she made a sound that wasn't a sound. Everything slowed and got hard-edged. He didn't freeze. He turned her over like a page and his hand was a metronome across her shoulder blades, steady and sure, and then a cough came up like a fish and the blueberry hit the floor with a tiny slap that I will hear in my sleep. He laid his forehead to hers and said, thank you, like a prayer, not to me, not to anyone, just to the universe for giving him something to hold. I sat on the floor and shook until my teeth clicked. He said, we're booking the CPR refresher, and we both laughed and cried at the same time because it sounded like a punchline and a penance. We sat in a library conference room with a plastic baby and a nurse who told terrible jokes about ribs not being glass, and I learned where to put my fingers all over again. He stayed after to ask for a printout to tape inside the pantry door. There are greasy fingerprints on it already. 2 mornings a week, we put a Fox backpack on a person who used to be the size of my forearm and we take her to a little co-op preschool with a mural of a whale whose eye is way too kind. The first day her mouth went sideways and she did the breathing stutter that means a storm is coming, and then someone handed her a colander and 5 pom-poms and she forgot to be sad. I remembered. I cried in the car with the kind of hiccup that makes your chest creak. He put his hand on the back of my neck and said, let's go buy a spatula for no reason. We wandered a thrift store that smelled like old winter and found a bowl the exact color of the ocean on a box of crayons. He held it up and said, we can make pancakes in a blue ocean, and I kissed him in and out between mismatched forks and a basket of cords that we'll never find their devices again. In the quiet that was left over, he said, do you think about another baby? And I said, I think about sleeping and writing and maybe next year I'll think about it for real, and he nodded like yes is not the only answer that sounds like love. I read out loud in a room where the folding chairs complained every time someone shifted. It wasn't a big deal to anyone except me. I had printed my pages and then printed them again like the extra ink would hold me up. He sat in the back with our daughter on his chest, asleep and sweating through his shirt, her mouth open like a baby bird who forgot to close it. I saw him and almost lost my place because his eyes were doing the thing they do now, soft and ready to catch. The sentence about the door and the pounding and the key came out quieter than I meant it to and thicker, and afterwards a woman with silver hair told me she liked my verbs. On the way home, he asked which part felt like a landing, and I realized I had one. We ran into his father at the hardware store, a man-shaped hiccup in an aisle of screws and promises. He said son like a dare. He didn't get dad back. My husband put the pack of nails down and came to stand next to me like a habit he wanted to keep. He didn't explain or debate. We left our cart where it was and we got back in the car and he breathed on a 4 count like our therapist taught him. At a red light, he took out his phone and opened a notes app and wrote 3 sentences he didn't read to me. He looked over and said, I don't have to perform dying to prove I mean it. We went to the other hardware store where the cashier had a gap in her teeth and called everyone honey. He paid cash because it felt right. There's a plant growing by the fence post where we buried the key. It found its way up on its own, a volunteer tomato or maybe a weed with a self-esteem problem. We stuck a stick in the dirt and looped a strip of old t-shirt around it as a tie and told it to keep going. He crouched there with his knees cracking and said, I can build it a trellis if it needs it, and kissed his fingers and pressed them into the ground like you would reassure a small crying person. The first time I saw a yellow flower open on it, I wanted to call someone and say, look, something made it, but I didn't know who. I sent him a picture instead. He sent back a tomato emoji and 3 exclamation points like we were teenagers. A storm took the lights out for 10 hours and the house immediately remembered being older than us. The fridge gave up a little moan and then silence came like cotton. He had a battery pack for his mask because of course he does now, and when he strapped in that night the machine hummed like a soft animal that knows how to survive. We put our mattress on the living room floor and made a tent out of a sheet and 2 chairs and our girl crawled under and said, ooh, like she discovered another universe. He tied a flashlight to a curtain rod with his shoelace, and we lay in the fake starlight and he didn't reach for his phone because it wouldn't have worked anyway. I could hear our neighbor's tree complaining for hours and then, at 3 a.m., it sighed to the ground and took one side of the fence with it. It should have been a disaster. It felt like an invitation. The next morning he and the neighbor stood over splinters and made a plan with their hands. The dog lay on the grass and monitored quality control. Our daughter wore 1 shoe and her pajama top and a diaper like a mayor and handed people screws. The fence is a different color now in that one spot. I like it better. His therapist assigned homework that sounded ridiculous. Say I can be interrupted out loud when you're doing something, and then let yourself be interrupted, and he did it so earnestly I almost rolled my eyes, until I watched him stop stirring onions when the baby called Dada, and turn the heat off instead of pretending he didn't hear, and walk over and hold her chubby wrists while she bounded like she was trying to leave gravity behind. The onions burned anyway and we ate them and he said, I can be interrupted, and it didn't sound like performance. It sounded like a sentence he was building tunnels underneath to make it big enough to live in. We planted herbs in a window box and now everything we cook tastes like a small green miracle. He still kills cilantro by looking at it too hard. Our daughter says 3 words with purpose and 5 with chaos. She can identify a plane by pointing at the ceiling no matter where she is. Sometimes at night I wake up and the hum is steady and the house is full of sleeping and I tiptoe down the hall and stand and watch the rectangle of her door until my eyes adjust. He is sitting in the rocker, a dark shape with a smaller shape curled into it, whisper singing, making up the parts he doesn't know and getting them right anyway. I lean against the frame and I put my palm on the cool wood and I listen to our life happening in the most boring, perfect way, and I swear I can hear the tomato plant stretching in the yard, reaching for a sun it hasn't met yet, believing, without proof, that warmth is coming.